Welcome to R&R Livin' Life. Such an amazing way to start our day, enjoying the view from our camp as we ate our breakfast. Today was an exploring day that would take us to Mapoon, Cullen Beach and the Gulf of Carpentaria. Before long we were out and about, crossing the longest single-lane bridge in Australia. What an experience crossing over the Mission River. I am sure those that work in the mines around here take it as it comes on a daily basis. There is so much we take for granted in this remarkable country, and the Mission River Bridge is one of them, spanning 1,040 metres. The bridge was built in 1971 and plays a key role in supporting the region's mining operations and its local communities. Weipa, a coastal mining town, is known for its vast bauxite deposits. European contact began in the early 17th century when Dutch explorer Willem Jasoen sighted the coast, and later Matthew Flinders in 1802 noted the cliffs around Albatross Bay had a distinctive reddish hue. On our way to Mapoon we crossed two haul roads but did not see the obligatory big haul machinery, only a smaller version of what I had been expecting, but them's the breaks. For most of the road past the mine we couldn't see much past the tree line, but red dust covered everywhere we looked. In 1891, Malvanian missionaries arrived in the area, establishing a mission at Mapoon. Then, in 1893, a Presbyterian mission was established at Spring Creek, 32 kilometres inland from present-day Weipa, later moved to the river in 1932-33, carrying the name Weipa Mission. By 1896, John Emberley had surveyed the land where Weipa now stands. It was later moved to Jessica Point on the Emberley River in 1932-33, carrying the name Weipa Mission. By 1896, John Emberley had surveyed the land where Weipa now stands. In 1955, geologist Harry Evans realised that Matthew Flinders' reddish cliffs were virtually pure bauxite, with an exploration camp established at Mading in 1956. As the mining operations expanded, so too did the town. It is fair to say that Weipa exists primarily because of the enormous bauxite deposits discovered in 1955, with mining operations beginning in 1960. Just after 9, we arrived in Mapoon, also referred to as Old Mapoon, where in 1891 a mission, the first for Cape York, was established near what is now known as Cullen Point, with the aim of providing education and health services to the Aboriginal people, following decades of warfare between cattlemen and explorers and the traditional owners. We had a look around the town but felt like we were intruding on the community, so continued on our way to Cullen Point, at the mouth of the Wenlock River, about 75 kilometres north of Weipa, and was surprised by the campsites with cement slabs. But what an amazing place, with pristine beaches to put up camp or even a caravan, depending on the size, for a few days. There were quite a few signs advising people to avoid swimming or being close to water, as marine stingers and crocodiles inhabit the area. The town of Mapoon is on a peninsula that extends into the Gulf of Carpentaria, with Cullen Point at its tip, creating a side bay of the Gulf called Port Musgrave. Dulce River and the Wenlock River flow through the locality into Port Musgrave. Red Beach is a sandy strip facing Port Musgrave, adjacent to the south side of town. We stopped where the original settlement of Mapoon was, where in 1963, in the interest of bauxite mining, the government forcibly removed residents, burning many homes, with the forced relocation and removal of many Indigenous families. However, throughout the 1970s and 1980s, residents fought to return home, eventually reclaiming their traditional lands. I think the only drawback for the morning was that at Mapoon Back Beach, with its serene turquoise waters and white sand, was to find out that it is often covered in marine debris. With more than 6 tons of it, comprising of in excess of 13,000 rubber thongs and the same number of plastic water bottles being removed every single year from the 14-kilometre stretch. As we left Mapoon, we stopped in at the Wenlock River. This pristine 320-kilometre long waterway is famous for possessing the highest freshwater fish biodiversity of any river in the country, as well as a large population of saltwater crocodiles. Originating in the Great Dividing Range in eastern Cape York, it flows through tropical savanna wetlands, rainforests and floodplains, forming the border of the Steve Irwin Wildlife Reserve. We had crossed it at Moreton Telegraph Station and at Batavia Downs. The river has a catchment area spanning over 7,500 square kilometres and experiences massive seasonal fluctuations. On our return to Weipa, we were lucky enough to see a massive vehicle on one haul road crossing. These haul roads are essential components of Rio Tinto's massive bauxite operations on the peninsula, supporting a continuous loop of heavy mining vehicles, massive 200-ton dump trucks and Kenworth C509 quad road trains. The reddish-orange rock, known as bauxite, is the world's primary ore for aluminium, the raw material essential for modern infrastructure, aerospace, clean energy technologies and beverage cans, composed mainly of hydrated aluminum oxides, iron oxides and silica. Bauxite is found mostly in tropical and subtropical regions, where it is mined at the surface and then refined. Red dust covered the trees, while behind the tree line we caught glimpses of huge piles of dirt, as bauxite is mined at the surface, so vastly different to coal mines. There were a couple of corners where we met vehicles coming at speed from the opposite direction, not only covering us with dust, but taking up most of the road, as just like us they were trying to avoid the corrugations. As we crossed back over the Mission River Bridge, we could see where repairs and maintenance were being carried out. Extensive underwater diving campaigns, pile remediation and structural paintworks are periodically conducted. As Mission River is home to many saltwater crocodiles and other dangerous marine predators, safety access to the piles below the waterline has always been an issue, requiring some innovative thinking and application. Pacific Marine Group carries out numerous diving inspections, maintenance and repair works for Rio Tinto Alcan, formerly Comalco, and have had to do some innovative thinking and application, particularly in the area of predator protection for the divers, with the use of a predator protection pontoon around each pier, serviced by the main diving platform barge. Rope mesh nets are suspended below the pontoon down to the seabed to provide protection. These nets can be raised or lowered as required to facilitate moving to the next pier. The barge and pontoon are kept in place using a network of anchors. I had not thought about the need for maintenance and repair work on such an important piece of infrastructure until we saw the Pacific Marine Group working on the bridge, but can understand how necessary it would be in this marine environment. After a bit of shopping in Weipa, Rick and I spent the remainder of the afternoon relaxing beside Albatross Bay, listening to and watching the storms as they rolled in across the bay and watching the fires in the east. After a very, very hot, humid night, we left Weipa, stopping in to check out the port facility, a major deep-water port primarily dedicated to the export of bauxite on our way out of town. Operated in conjunction with Rio Tinto, it consists of 4 primary wharves across 2 main locations. Loram Point wharves consist of 2 continuous berths, totalling 548.6 metres in length, with 2 ship loaders operating. It was a huge concern. Situated along the eastern shore of Albatross Bay, The port consists of multiple independent shipping terminals, not only including Loram Point East and West, but Evans Landing and Humbug Point, with the port designated for handling very large quantities of bauxite for export, as well as a small amount of petroleum products imported for local consumption. Approximately 440 vessels and over 22 million tonnes of cargo is handled annually at the port. We spent quite a bit of time watching what was happening at the port and in the bay. From our vantage point overlooking Albatross Bay, we made our way back to the Peninsula Development Road, with around 200 kilometres to Archer River, and the road corrugations were no better travelling south. Around 80 kilometres southeast of Weipa, we passed York Downs Station, a 130,000 hectare working Brahman cattle station and carbon abatement project. The station herd is focusing on breeding before cattle are moved south for fattening. As with many properties on Cape York, the cattle are able to freely graze the property, tending to follow the green pick or pastures in the wake of storms and rainfall. Since 2011, the property has been improving fire management practices as part of a savanna burning carbon project, whereby early in the dry season they conduct controlled mosaic burns that will help to maintain and manage the wildfires occurring later in the season. These early burns decrease the size and intensity of wildfires by removing much of their fuel load, making them easier to manage and control. It also protects their pastures and infrastructure. From York Downs Station, Batavia Downs turnoff, we had about 180 kilometres to Archer River, along the dirt and gravel road with intermittent bitumen sections, with some sections of gravel very corrugated, some prone to dust from oncoming traffic, and some washouts in the bottom of creek crossings. Overall, Rick found the road not too bad, and from my point of view, we had travelled on much worse roads. This country is remarkable with just how diverse the topography is. It is sometimes difficult to perceive just how many streams, watercourses and creeks meander across the Gulf country. What seems to be flat is often very deceptive. We passed a sign advising unfenced road, watch out for wandering stock, but it was not something we needed to see, as we are always on the lookout for stock and wildlife in rural and regional areas, especially in isolated areas. It really isn't something drivers should have to be reminded of, but then again I have heard people complain about thoughtless farmers who are inconsiderate not fencing the roadway. Not all animals stay confined behind fences. I have yet to see cattle, or wildlife for that matter, knowing, understanding or following road rules. Wouldn't that be something? Teaching animals to stay off the road. As we topped a rise, we didn't know what to expect of the country. It could be flat and low-lying plains, transitioning between rusty red outback dirt to open savanna woodlands or expansive eucalypt savannas, dotted with massive seasonal wetlands, or a dramatic river system. I was disappointed not to see much wildlife, but considering the good season the area was having, wildlife would have been spread out across the huge area. On arriving at the Bamaga-Pajinka turnoff, we had travelled the first 145 kilometres from Weipa and were now on familiar gravel again for the next 116 kilometres to Cowan. We passed a sign advising that the road floods regularly for the next 100 kilometres, so knew that there would be lots of low-level causeways, gullies and creeks to cross. We encountered a wedge-tailed eagle, the largest bird of prey on the continent, as it took off from what it was eating on the road. I have tried on numerous occasions to take photographs of them, but they stay close to the ground, often well camouflaged, so difficult to see. Adult wedge-tails have long broad wings, fully feathered legs, an unmistakable wedge-shaped tail, an elongated upper mandible, a strong beak and powerful feet. They reside in most habitats present in Australia, ranging from desert and semi-desert to plains to mountainous areas to forest and even sometimes tropical rainforest. However, their preferred habitats tend towards those that have a fairly varied topography, including rocky areas, some open terrain and native woodlands such as eucalypt stands. They really are a magnificent bird. As we made our way along the Peninsula Development Road, I wondered about those early settlers to the region, about how tough it must have been for them to carve out a living in such a remote and isolated area, with no built-up roads like we were traversing, grazing cattle in unfenced country, learning where water was and the lay of the land. In the early 80s, I remember having to get in supplies for the wet season, as we would be cut off from the nearest town for months, and having to rely on the flying doctor over the two-way for telegrams, doctor's consultations, and weather reports, so everyone in the Gulf knew what was happening. No secrecy there. It was such an experience, but nothing compared to those early settlers. No communication, no roads unless they forged them themselves, no medical help, always having to be self-sufficient. Having left Weipa just before 7, we made it to Archer River by 9:30, having made good time. Boy, what a massive river it is! We drove down under the new bridge to the old crossing, and were amazed by just how high the new bridge is. The amount of water that flows under and over this bridge during the wet season is astonishing. It is staggering to think the sheer volume of water that goes over this bridge when it floods. The headwaters of the Archer River rise in the Magillawah Ranges, and it flows west, traversing tropical savanna plains and wetlands, flowing through Piccaninny Plains Sanctuary and Archer Bend National Park, located in central Cape York, about 25 kilometres north of Cowan, and enters the Archer Bay in the Gulf of Carpentaria on the western side of the peninsula near the town of Arakoon, along with the Watson and Ward rivers. The catchment area for the Archer River is around 13,800 square kilometres. During the wet season between November and April, the river floods, replenishing over 1 million hectares of wetlands. The Cowan River is a tributary of the Archer River. Rick and I will leave you here at Archer River for this episode. Join us next time as we continue south to the Han River Roadhouse, Laura, and on to Mariba. Stay safe. Enjoy every moment. Rick and Rosemary. R&R Live and Life.